Heading into fantasy football drafts, here's a few tight ends I would look to avoid to draft on draft day. The first guy, Noah Fant of the Seattle Seahawks. Fant was traded in the offseason, the Russell Wilson deal here. And obviously his fantasy value is going to take a major hit. And even over the last few seasons, I think he was a little bit overrated for fantasy football. Last season with Denver, 68 catches, 670 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. Now he goes to Seattle, where their quarterback's either going to be Geno Smith or Drew Lock to start the season here. And I still got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. But right here, I just feel like that offense is going to struggle no matter who the quarterback is over there in Seattle. And Noah Fant last season wasn't good with the Denver Broncos, even though I know Teddy Bridgewater was the quarterback. But it's the same type of situation here over there in Seattle. So right now, he'll be third or fourth option on the Seattle offense. Right now, he's going about later round the fantasy drafts here. But he's even a guy I wouldn't even bother looking at going into fantasy leagues at all. Even as a bench piece, there's no reason to really carry 2 tight ends. So this season here, Noah Fant, he's not going to be a top 12 tight end, in my opinion, where he won't be useful in 12-team leagues or a flex option here. And right now, going into draft day, he definitely takes a hit going to the Seattle Seahawks. If he stayed in Denver with Russell Wilson, a different story, but quarterback has a lot to do with it. And also, last season and the last few seasons, he hasn't done much. So right now, I wouldn't target Noah Fant, and I would let someone else draft him on draft day. And he's a guy I would avoid this season. The next guy, David Njoku with the Cleveland Browns. And Njoku, he'll be the number 1 tight end once again over there in Cleveland, with Austin Hooper gone in free agency, going to the Tennessee Titans. And Njoku last season in Cleveland, 36 catches, 475 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. So right here, if Deshaun Watson was starting the season, maybe a different bit of a story here. But even if Watson was starting, he was never a big target for tight ends here, was Watson. Watson always hiking those playmaker wide receivers and making plays with his legs. So right here, he'll be the number 1 is Njoku. Right now, he's going 11th to 12th round in most fantasy leagues. But I just feel like he's been a bust as Njoku throughout his NFL career here. This is the 4th or 5th season now for him. A lot of hype coming out in the NFL draft, and he just hasn't got the job done. I know Baker Mayfield wasn't a good Cleveland Brown, but he had the right weapons around him for Njoku to have openings in the middle of the field and have one-on-one coverage when I had Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry, but that just hasn't been the case. And right now, Njoku, I think he could be a bust once again this season, so I would stay away from him. And believe it or not, tight end is a pretty deep position this season here in fantasy football. And Njoku is another guy I definitely would look to avoid this season. The next guy is Engram of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Engram last season, he was on this list going into the season. And I was actually correct about that one. 46 catches for the Giants last year, 408 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. And that goes to the Jaguars. And the only reason he went is because he got big money to go over there in Jacksonville. Last season with Daniel Jones, he didn't get the job done. I know Jacksonville, they're trying to rebuild over there and build the team with some weapons at least around Trevor Lawrence, but they didn't get the right guys, I believe. Christian Kirk, yeah, he's a decent receiver. Evan Engram, he's a decent tight end, but he's not a guy that's going to pop off the charts or have much fantasy value. Yeah, maybe a few games this season he'll have a big stat line as Evan Engram, but he's definitely a guy I wouldn't want to draft on draft day, and definitely a guy I wouldn't want in my starting lineup as well, unless you're in the deepest of leagues, 16-team leagues or something. But basic 10 and 12-team leagues, there's no reason to target Evan Engram. He's a guy what I believe his best days are behind him. And the quarterback situation from Daniel Jones to Lawrence isn't much of a difference at all, I believe. Even though we know Lawrence is his second year, he definitely could take a monster jump like Joe Burrow did from his first to second year, but we got to see it first. So right now, I'm weary of drafting Evan Engram going into fantasy drafts, and he's a guy you really just can't count on. Over the last few seasons, he hasn't gotten the job done. The next guy, Tyler Higbee of the Los Angeles Rams. So Higbee, he's been up and down in his Los Angeles Ram career. And even last season, 61 catches, 560 yards, and 5 touchdowns. And he's a tight end going now anywhere from the 12th to 13th round in most fantasy leagues. And Higbee, yeah, he's on this list because of the inconsistency. There were a lot of games last season where he just didn't show up, and then he got injured a little bit. And now over there, I know Gerald Everett's gone, and he went in free agency to the other Los Angeles team with the Chargers here. But I still think Tyler Higbee's not a guy that's going to be a main vocal point in the offense. Obviously, Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson and Von Jefferson over there, and Cam Akers, who could do work out of the backfield as well. So he's the 4th or 5th option on this offense. A lot of people were big into Higbee a few seasons ago when he had that breakout with Jared Goff. But him and Stafford, it didn't seem like they had that great rapport last season. And I expect a little bit of the more of the same from him this year. 500, 600 yards maybe, 4 or 5 touchdowns. Some games he'll pop, and some games he won't do much. But I think there's so many better options at tight end this season that Tyler Higbee's a guy at best. I would draft him just for my bench, but as a starter, he's not a guy week in and week out you could count on. And this season, I'm definitely going to avoid him. And the final tight end I look to avoid this season is Hunter Henry of the New England Patriots. So Hunter Henry in his first season with New England last year, yes, he was a red zone target and he got the job done, but only 50 catches, 63 receiving yards, and 9 receiving touchdowns. Right here, this New England team, they're built on defense and a physical running game with Damian Harris and Stevenson in the backfield over there. And right now, they got Devontae Parker they traded for, which I think was a good move for them. And they're going to just go like with that formation. And you also got Jonnu Smith there, who I think this season, if he stays healthy, could take some red zone targets here for Hunter Henry. And Henry's another tight end going 12th to the 14th round. There's a guy for your bench. Yeah, he's decent, but a guy just like Higbee, not each and every week I'm going to want him in my starting lineup because there's games you're going to get 2 points and there's games you're going to get 15. But if you don't score that touchdown, Hunter Henry, he's pretty much not an option in fantasy football. And he's also a guy with a track record of bad injury history. So right here, a lot of factors for me not to draft Hunter Henry, and he's a tight end to avoid. So that's a few tight ends I look to avoid here heading into fantasy drafts within the next couple weeks.